Mhm.
Oh,
Right, so we're recording. So the floor is yours, my friend.
I didn't think that you'd get that sort of a notification. It was really formal, but anyway, thank you everyone for coming. Today, yeah, I mean, I'm overwhelmed by the fact that there are 27 people in this Zoom call. It's the first time I've done this sort of thing. You know what? I won't talk anymore. I mean, I'll continue talking, but I'll just get the presentation on the road and get my screen share going, so I can get Mike's face off the screen as well. So we'll get straight into it. So guys, I've titled this presentation, Simplifying Sprinting. And so as a bit of background, there are a lot of people here who I do know, a lot that I don't. My name's Jack Edwards. I'm a sprint coach based in Sydney. I'm also an English teacher, so that's my other side gig. It's the other way around, but anyway. I coach with a team, so I need to recognize Louis Dennison and Michael Sarakis, who are here supporting me for their collaboration and expertise in the coaching of the athletes. I need to thank the athletes themselves for the opportunity to coach them. They always take the feedback on and apply themselves to just become better athletes, and I love that. And thank you to everyone here. A lot of the content for this presentation isn't mine. So this is videos taken by Mike, by myself. If you see anything that looks beautiful and professional, Louis has definitely made it. So a lot of the kinograms, a lot of the GIFs and things like that, Louis has made it. So I'll throw it out of the road. He's a legend. What is this presentation even about? So it's kind of vague when I mentioned it on Instagram, but what I really want to do is try to simplify viewing running footage. And this is a pretty vital part of, training sprints. And then I want to try and help you guys simplify the solutions for the improvement of running mechanics. And then we're going to use a case study of an athlete that we train and show how these solutions may be applied for long-term technical development of a sprinter. And if I don't talk too much, maybe we've got time for a little bit of Q&A at the end, but we'll see how we go. And on that note, as Mike has mentioned earlier, if you do have a question, just feel free to pop it in the chat. Mike won't hesitate to just interrupt me and make sure we can keep the ball rolling. So why create this presentation? Why does sprinting need to be simplified? I don't know. There's a couple of reasons. I guess one of the first things is that I don't know why the analysis of sprinting has become this these days, where there'll be lines drawn everywhere. I don't even know what I'm looking at. And it's confused me. I think it's confused a lot of people. And all I want is simple language to sort of explain phenomena, which you get to see on a track. The other thing which is also led me here is that I've experienced it. I've seen other athletes experience it. When progress stagnates, when it comes to speed in particular, we start to look for answers in all the wrong place. So sometimes you're like, do I need more work, less work? Do I just need to be more diced? Do I need more power? My ankle's stiff enough? Do I need a supplement? You start looking at some weird anatomical bullcrap, whether or not your nose is too big, your elbows are too pointy to run. And the thing is, if you start to get into this mindset, it becomes a bit of a white whale. The reality is you can never be diced enough. You can never be powerful enough. And you're looking for all the answers in the wrong places. When it comes to speed, and if the goal is speed, technique is almost always the answer. So in training for sprints, really want to do is try to create a technical model that's efficient. You need to mold it, reinforce it through repetition, and then intensify it over a long period of time. The athlete and the coach who are just able to sort of stay on track and not be distracted by these other factors, which may be important, but are less important in technical development, will be the ones which reach their goals at a faster rate. And so if the athlete just consistently addresses these positions that are important for themselves, they'll reach their goals quicker. And I guess this annoying dichotomy, this annoying paradox of sprint training is that it takes a long time. You need a lot of patience and you need to go through the process to get there. So what are we observing during sprinting? I think what sort of creates sprinting complex is that there are just a lot of moving pieces, and these pieces are moving at rapid rates. I love these kinograms, which Altus has popularized. But I think if you asked a different athlete, a different coach, everyone would give a different feedback on what to look at, what's important. And so what I really want to try and do is to just try to give you some points which I think that are consistent among great sprinters And you can just make sure that your eye is actually focusing on the things that are important. So what we're going to look at is, we're just going to try and track where the foot is during a sprint gait. We're going to look at the free leg activity at the point of ground contact. We're going to look at lumbo-pelvic control briefly. We're going to try to look at this idea of problem-solving sprint related issues. And we're going to look at a case study. So I've got the program, I've got videos. Oh, sorry. That's stout. Anyway, we've got videos and results of an athlete going through a program. We're able to track the technical development of this athlete. So basically if we're looking at the foot at different stages of the sprint cycle, prior to ground contact, we've got the foot dorsiflexed. It's going to preload the hamstrings, posterior chain, all that. We've got this beautiful photo of Marcel Jacobs only a couple of weeks ago, who's one of my favorite sprinters at the moment. At point of ground contact, we just want the foot to come as close as possible to under the center of mass. It's always going to be a little bit in front, but at least the intent is there to come under the center of mass. And at toe off position, we're trying to minimize the point spent at toe off, and we need to try to bring it into hip flexion as soon as possible. So we'll look at each of these points individually, and please, again, feel free in the chat to just say, Jack, slow down for a moment, replay anything. This is what we're sort of looking at it from a foot prior to the ground contact position. We've got two of our fastest athletes here. And if we're just looking at these feet in the still shot, both of them are dorsiflexed. You can almost see their toes coming up through the upper of their shoe. And they're almost pulling back with their heel. And that's something which I've heard Dan Pfaff talk a lot about, is that if we're pulling back with the heel, we're getting pretension at the calf, hamstring, the glutes erectors. He says it far more eloquently and with bigger words, but that is the basics of what's happening here. So prior to ground contact, what we're trying to do is to prepare for the collision with the ground. So you create the pretension, it leads to a more efficient ground contact position, which is closer to under the center of mass. What you really want to see is a creation of negative foot speed. And what that will look like is the foot is stuck here, but the torso is traveling over the top. And an active participation at this point prior to ground contact will just lead to an increase in limb velocity. So I've got two videos here, and I do love that I got a bunch of the athletes that we coach here in the chat. And any of these videos, nothing is personal, it's purely professional, and you're all awesome. But we're going to look at different videos of different sprinters doing stuff, okay? So this is an example of someone who doesn't really dominate that prior to ground contact position. And I'll slow it down because I think over Zoom, it doesn't translate that well. But, so I'll get it so it's a bit more in the center. This is sort of this point prior to ground contact. If we look at the foot exclusively, we're only focusing here. It's quite a flaccid foot. We can't really see the toes poking up. We don't see any negative foot speed. And what happens is that lower limb continues to drift forward. There's no real active participation by athlete, and the foot strikes in front of the center of mass. So it's sort of a simple observation. Here's an athlete who does a bit better at this position prior to ground contact. Previous athlete, kind of new to sprints. This athlete is 400-meter athlete. And what I'll do is I'll slow it down again, and because it's quite subtle. Stop it here. So you'd see the toe dorsiflexed, quite strong. And it's like the shin is just dropping down as the torso moves over the top of it. That is the intent to pull back. Ground contact is really quite nice towards the center of mass, and it's just an easy spring out of that position. So that is the foot prior to ground contact in a nutshell. We can sort of move on to the foot at ground contact. So we've got a bunch of different athletes to look at here. Pretty much we just want it to be close to under center of mass, which is what we saw in that last video. But there are a couple of questions about this position. How did it get there is a really good question. But really simply put, if the foot is in front of the center of mass, you've got to overcome these forces. If it's closer to underneath, you don't really have that issue. If the foot is under the center of mass, there's a good intent to move forward, and you're able to apply force in a more vertical plane. So here we have an athlete who doesn't do it as well. And I'll pause it again for when we can observe it. So it's coming through. The foot is doing okay, but the ground contact is quite far in front of the center of mass. She has to overcome a lot of force. Get this flying. This athlete owns these positions and does a really good job of it. She's really good at switching in the air. You know, she's trying to work on other things as well. Like she's got pretty like plantar flex foot and all that stuff. But what she does quite well, that ground contact, she's still trying to bring it under the hip. And that ground contact time is decreased. And each step is just recycling really nicely. Again, none of these are original ideas. They should have been talked about a billion times over, but I'm just reinforcing them. Now we're going to just look at the toe-off position. There's a photo of myself, 400-meter athlete, another sprinter. And we all, I don't know, I think we all kind of suck at this position, and something we all want to work on, especially me. And pretty much at toe-off position, I think that we should be trying to get out of it as soon as possible. It's the vast majority of the force application has occurred in the initial stage of the ground contact. It's something like 75% of the ground contact force has already been applied in the first 25% of time. So seeking for more out of the ground will have ramifications on the timing of the subsequent stride as it delays the hip flexion going into it. And what this will look like is the athlete continues to push even after they've hit that peak hip extension. So we've got the same athlete running, it's a couple of months apart. And this one's a little bit more subtle. So, tell me if you want me to replay it, but. Okay, so pause it. Come on, YouTube, do your thing. All right. So this athlete has sort of started almost to hit hip extension about here. If we're looking for an improvement in max velocity mechanics, we try and see that left hip sort of hit it and quit it and start to get into hip flexion. Instead, it's just like a continued push through the ground. And it takes a long time for that left hip to have intent to flex and get ready for the next stride. And this is sort of contrary to like a lot of what people see as like aesthetic and beautiful running, but we kind of have to see each stride as a piece of, it's not really done individually. You have to consider what's going to happen next. So the hip starts to flex like now. So it's quite late because we're almost going to hit the floor. Whereas this was a couple months later, we just looked at this exact same video, sorry. And, she sort of starts to hit peak hip flexion there. We don't need to continue to push through the ground. And the hip flexion of that right leg, so that right leg coming through, punching forward, has started significantly earlier than in the previous video. And she's just more ready for the next stride. And this is an athlete who had has an issue or like has a history with calf problems, and we sort of identified that as a mechanic that we wanted to fix as well. So that's toe off. I hope this is kind of making sense. And we've just got, this is the blurriest of all photos, you know, low quality videos. But,
Sorry, can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in terms of trying to sort of visually understand that sort of going from extension to flexion sort of coming through again, is that why like knees coming together at like ground contact is like a thing?
Yeah, so I think we'll go over that in a tick. I think you're stealing my thunder here nicely, but I think you know, if we're looking at that position at ground contact, if those knees aren't close together, it's typically a result of delayed hip flexion of the foot that which is coming off the ground. So we'll have a look at that in a tick. But it's a good question. I think that it's you know, sprinting's all about timing and coordination pretty much. So if you time and coordinate that hip flexion too late, the following stride is also going to be late to the party. So this is what you're alluding to here, Mickey Hands, is free leg activity. So we've got Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, Blessing Okabare, and Sha'Carri Richardson. And I think especially Sha'Carri Richardson is just amazing at the free leg activity. This is PJ Vazel's work, comes off toe off and is straight into hip flexion. And you can see her knee is even in front of the other knee at the point of ground contact. And, you know, this athlete here does the same, because as we saw in that previous video, peak hip flexion is hit. Let's get out of ground contact and let's get on to the next stride. So what you want to see is you want to see a closing of, you want to close the gate is what I've described it to other athletes here. So we've got one athlete here, there's quite a significant gap. And this athlete here, whose strategy is really for frequency and being ready for the next stride, is even in front of the knee. So it's pretty incredible. What you want to see is the shin of that swing leg more parallel to the ground. You want to hip flex following toe off. And we're just trying to prepare for the next stride. You know, if you can go super long out the back and be ready for the next stride, it's just got to be rapid hip flexion. And it's just a skill which not all possess. Now we can see this in movement. So we've seen this footage already, and we sort of understand what the positions are. But I'll play this athlete's run one more time. And as Mickey Hands alluded to, let's try and, as soon as we hit the toe off position, see this athlete do a really good job of starting hip flexion immediately. I hope this is coming across as smoothly for you guys as it is for me with the YouTube, but I know how Zoom can be sometimes.
It looks pretty good, Jack, to be honest.
Oh, man. Michael, thank you. I'll continue then. So,
sorry, could I pause, since I've paused you now? We had Rob just asked, was the calf issue gastrococcyleus? And we've already got someone reply. It's mostly soleus. So, yes, thank you.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah, and so when we, just a really sort of brief one, looking at lumbopelvic control. So simply, this is kind of complex and case by case, but a relatively neutral pelvic orientation, just without excessive oscillations. And I think that when you're talking to the athlete, you kind of want to, keep them you want to promote control. You know, nothing which is just like everything is flying out the window. That's when the oscillations are occurring. And we can see here, Louis put this awesome kinogram of one of our athletes together, and we're looking at the differences between left and right sides. And you can see how subtle changes of the hip have drastic ramifications further down the chain. There are different positions Sorry, your guys' heads are all in front of the road down there. So this top side here is a slightly more neutral pelvis. This one tends to tip forward. And when things are done at such high velocities, it makes a difference. So I've got the same athlete running 2 different times at different, one was months ago. Now in spikes, absolutely legging it down the track, and he hit some good positions, but he definitely will flip it over and become a bit anterior bias. And that's, he's still moving over 10 meters a second comfortably, but you could see it's all just tipping over. Doesn't really have any lumbopelvic control, just even from that still. And this is a few weeks ago. No, he's not really tipping forward. The torso is not falling over. It's a little bit anterior, but he's in control. And this is a faster time in flats. And a lot of those positions which were alluded to earlier in this discussion were being addressed when we look back at a lot of the footage. So,
Jack, sorry, I'll just pause you. We've got Tony asking, sorry, I missed the presentation outline. Jack, I am assuming the front side focus to minimize ground contact is at max velocity. What are your thoughts on foot ankle mechanics in the acceleration phase? Is this something maybe we can hold this one for the end?
I think this one in particular, if we could...
Perfect. Yeah, we can hold that one to the end.
Hold it,
yep.
Yeah.
No problem.
Quickly, Jack, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Given that most people in sprinting do have an anterior pelvic tilt bias,
yeah,
how do you aim to mitigate that in these sorts of high velocity environments?
Mate, I don't know if I have the solutions, but I've got some ideas for you. And literally the slide after this one might be able to address it. We need we've got all this great footage, and we've got fantastic athletes who are fast, despite them not being perfect, because no one is. But once we make these observations, how can we make solutions? I guess we can sort of start that discussion in like a minute, and maybe I'll be a bit more succinct with it. So I appreciate the question. I'll be with you in one tick. So as far as technical takeaways go, I tried to really simplify it. Dorsiflex the foot, intent to strike on the center of mass. You don't need to over push out a toe off, flex the hip and stay in control of the pelvis. That sounds really simple, but it's, I think for anyone who's tried sprinting, it's definitely not as simple because things are moving quickly. And I'm actually not 100% sure who asked me that question. But I hope to try and get an idea of how we can try and solve these problems. So, firstly, you do need to identify kind of the source of the problem. So, I don't know, maybe in that instance, it's with the last athlete, we sort of looked at his lumbopelvic control and we're like, we need to start addressing this. With that previous female sprinter, we might need to look at the way the toe-off position occurs, especially given injury history, whatever it is. And oftentimes addressing this problem can have a cascading effect on other parts of the running cycle. And what will probably happen is that you likely need to regress the skill. And then you need to communicate with the athlete what you're trying to accomplish technically and why they need this technical intervention. And so maybe you're trying to raise the ceiling of the athlete's performance, or perhaps it leads to a longer, healthier athlete. So maybe the current technical model of the athlete has a ceiling of what it can accomplish. And really by training more, you're just intensifying a flawed model. How about we try remodel a different technical model, and then we can go about intensifying that, and that'll have a high ceiling. So what you need to try and do is you need to create an environment for the athlete to find the positions of importance. And maybe there's some of those positions which I talked about earlier. You need to let them know what it is, and don't make it up on the spot. Don't watch them do a single run and then try to figure out what the cue is prior to, on the spot. Don't figure out what the cue is on the spot. You know, watch footage and try and figure out the cue, try and figure out what you're trying to accomplish before the session happens based on the analysis of the footage or maybe some data. And I've got this example of like one of my first athletics coaches was Fira Dolcina, who's an 85-year-old Ukrainian lady. All she wanted me was to find dorsiflexion of the foot. And I think I heard coxitoys a million times. And we need to prioritize the learning of these positions. So common practice in sprint training especially is to go like warm up, you know, movement prep, drills, sprints, whatever. But, you know, oftentimes maybe if these positions are that important and a drill is addressing it, perhaps you can make the drill the training. It shouldn't be dealt with as movement prep. There should maybe be a lot of good intent behind this drill, and you can maybe intensify it. I made this stupid meme on the right. You know, this is like this. What this is person A just doing the most sexy A skips, B skips, dribbles, dorsiflexion through the roof, and then going on to try and execute these skills at high velocities under intense fatigue in a lactic bath, and it all looks like caca. What is the point of doing all this technical work just to throw it out, you know, 5 minutes later? I don't understand it too much, to be honest. So we started to try to find solutions for different athletes, and everyone needs something different. So this is a bit of a funky one, but it's an example of an athlete needing something, creating a drill or an exercise, and prioritizing learning it to create a better technical model. So we had the athlete who spent too much time at toe off, and this is Mike's work. Mike was working with this athlete a lot. And all Mike wanted to do was for the athlete to feel hip extension, have like sensation of the glutes. So the calves would do a little bit less. And this athlete did this as their running session for like months on end. And because she's a competitor and an incredible athlete, she probably wanted to blow her brains out. This in combination with a lot of like sensation-based, like a bit of S&C, I can't believe the transfer that there was from this stupid looking thing to like a mechanical model, technical model in running. Mike, did I explain that kind of right? You're looking for just hip extension and not getting the calves to do too much?
Yeah, no, it was perfect. Yeah. I think he explained it better than I could, so that's good.
And then, you know, there are other instances of this. So where the athlete, you know, this drill wasn't done this specifically for like a lumbo-pelvic control, but it could have been applied for it. And just providing the spaces for the athlete to step into means that they might not overstride, they might not push too much, that in combination with cueing, and they can sort it out. So this was the athlete session. He had 20 meters build-in, 20-meter cone drill, and he did that like 4 or 5 times. We put a free lap chip on him, and he's still running like a 2.2, 2.3, 20-meter fly time. And he's hitting really good positions, which we want to transfer to track. So that is obviously a minor aggression from sprinting compared to the exogeny push, but it still has the intent to try and learn better positions for sprinting. Here we've got a kilogram, same athlete, one of them doing max velocity runs, one of them doing mini hurdle wickets. This was not this athlete's best time effort. Like it wasn't the best example of her sprinting capabilities, but unlucky to that athlete because we've used it as an example with Louis making this kilogram, compared it to some of the positions which are found over mini hurdles. There's really nothing stopping us from using these mini hurdles and lengthening them out and just using it as the training session until the point where they're built to close to near max velocity speeds. And then I guess the other solution is that you just run the athletes at a slower time. You know, this is a 400-meter athlete, and really he could have done 300 of these on no recovery, right, at the same time, but, you know, not sort of placing these big metabolic demands can at least give them the opportunity to play around, focus on something, and just do it at a lower intensity. So 400 athlete might be able to do 120, 150 meters and still try and make technical improvements as they're doing it if it's done at a lower intensity and with adequate recovery. Some of our more 100-meter orientated athletes will do like repeat 60-meter efforts. They're not ending up in a lactic bath because they don't really require the metabolic stress and the stimulus for their event, but they're able to work on their technique. So sometimes just submaximal running, which isn't necessarily looking for some sort of metabolic adaptation, they'll get it. They get it anyways. Just turn it down a notch, you know. I think it's a good idea. I've got a few examples here of athletes. We're trying to make solutions, but you can see that it just doesn't quite hit right. And that happens. Like sometimes you just pick an exercise and it doesn't hit, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's good for the athlete. They have the intent to make a change, which is all you want. But you shouldn't really be afraid to just say, this is not the exercise for you as well. So we've got a former beach sprinter trying to dribble, and we really wanted her to dorsiflex the crap out of her foot, because I think in beach sprinting, it's a lot about like a knee extension going into the sand and all this stuff. And we can see here that the foot is not doing, you know, really what we want, but she started to pick it up recently, and the dribble maybe just wasn't for her. Similarly, we've got another athlete. They were doing dribbles. His feet look a little bit better here, but it's kind of just like an active knee extension. Again, it just wasn't right for that athlete, and that's fine. You know, it's okay to give it a whirl and then be like, that's not the solution. That's not the environment for the athlete to learn. And then this is a former steeplechaser who, when running at max velocity, would like overstride a lot, really delayed hip flexion. So we gave him mini hurdles. And maybe if we did this more over time, we'd see changes. Unsure, but at least she's finding positions which aren't found in her natural sprinting technical model for that time. So if we're looking at these takeaways for solutions, we really just want to try and find environments which promote positions which you want to accomplish in sprinting. You need to regress the skill enough to where the competence is actually possible. You know, if we're asking for this incredible hip flexion timing from an athlete, but we're also asking for them to do it at maximum velocity, it's unfair. You've got a maths student and you're teaching them Shakespeare. Like it's impossible for them to pass that test. You probably also can't teach and learn technique under fatigue. And I think above all, you should just try to reinforce the importance of that drill, of that exercise, and why you're trying to accomplish it all the time. You know, I think athletes always want an improvement in times, an improvement in the measurables. But if you're a coach who knows what they're trying to look for, you feel confident in the progress of an athlete if their technical model is improving. 1 second, sorry. All right. So I guess, you know, with this case study, what has happened is we've made some observations and we've tried to create solutions, and we've seen a change in the technical model of this sprinter. So I guess we'll give a bit of background about this athlete, the former 400-meter athlete with really good sprint personal bests. And he started training with us only at the start of this year after 9 months off during the COVID period. And I think he just wanted a break from it all. He also has injury history at his knee, and he's torn his hamstring more than once. His training history sort of biases more high volume work. So when I mean high volume, you know, he's looking at, you know, 200-meter repeats, that's that kind of stuff, you know, former middle distance squad. And even before that with coaches who quite like a lot of over distance work, and mainly trained predominantly on grass. And if you're a sprinter, that actually is kind of an important factor. When he came to us, he wanted to change from the 4 to the 100 and the 200. Initially, he really wanted to compete late in the 2021 season. And if you're out of sync with the Australian athletics calendar, the competitions start in October, or like late September, October. They go through Christmas and stuff. Things start to ramp up late January, and there are nationals in March. So he would have tried to get on the back of the Australian athletics season. And yeah, so he had natural speed as well. Like he's obviously quick. He's run 10.7, 21.3 into massive headwinds. And within the first 5 weeks, he ran a 60 meter and he ran like a 196 in flats. with using a free lap timing gate over 20 meters. And he's done that off no training. But we saw this running at high velocities, and we thought that we really actually had to make an intervention. So we convinced him to not compete this year, as it would have been unprepared for the demands of the event. What we had to do is we had to take away max velocity stimulus, as we deemed the mechanics potentially harmful, given his injury history. And as I've talked about before, we needed to strip away a skill which he's not able to complete in that sort of environment and try to remodel it. So his entire program, we remodeled it to promote technical improvement for what he needs. And this is work which I did a lot with Louis as well. So Louis made these kinograms. This is the second week of his training with us. We've got the pointed toe off, and you can see like it took 4 kinograms for him to begin hip flexion of that left leg. You can see he's got quite a passive foot. It casts forward. There's a lot which we were just a little bit wigged out by, and that's him at a tempo pace. And this is him at max velocity. Got the toe off position here. So trying to get through it all. You know, we could see this shin isn't really like parallel to the floor, that we don't really like where the foot's going. This thing is casting forward crazy. There's a large split. So what we thought is that we needed you to see the foot be a bit more active, dorsiflexed. He was over pushing every stride. So after every stride, every hip flexion was a little delayed. That lower limb would therefore flick forward because that stride was late to the party. And we thought this was stressful on his hammies and that there was something bad was going to happen. And he had really poor lumbo-pelvic control. It's just flicking back and forward. And even if we don't have the footage on these slides, if you were to film him from behind, you would see a lot of a lateral rock going back forward laterally. And this was, I think, a strategy to help him pull his femur through instead of him actually flexing the hip. So what we wanted to see from him, we just wanted to see the swing leg come through faster. We wanted to see his foot dorsiflex. We wanted to see ground contact closer to center of mass. And we kind of just wanted to see things be like more in control, and a little subjective, but it's something which we observed. What we did for the programming is in a 3-day-a-week cycle, 3 days per week cycle. He accelerated twice per week, and he dribbled once. Even if we were observing all these things happening at more upright mechanics, we actually thought that all the lumbo-pelvic stuff, all the issues were occurring before he got to upright, and he needed to control acceleration in order to actually express his awesome upright, to express his max velocity skill. And then we dribbled to try and develop his technique in more upright positions. This is what his program looked like for the week 1 of this whole experience. So you can see 2 acceleration sessions. One of them is resisted. One of them's unassisted. One's not resisted. It's going 10, 20, 30 meters. Almost walk back, have a sippy la-la, go again. Do that 3 times. On low recovery, the intensity isn't that high. He's in flats, not spikes. And the same here. For dribbles, he's only going out to 30 meters. As far as the S&C stuff goes, it's not really all about that, but I guess it should be acknowledged. Initially, we were like, the intensity on the track is down, the velocities are down. This is a good opportunity to develop maximum strength. And so he just started trap barring, split squatting. This became trap bar anyway at a later point. And because Louis and I, we sort of, we all sort of subscribed to a bit more of a vertical integration approach. We had a bit of power stuff on the day here in which the running was not as demanding. So we can develop into that. Now, what did that look like week 1? This is the first week of this program.
Jack, could I just pause you before you...
Yeah, slow me down, yeah.
No, we just had a question from Rob. He said, Jack, is the lateral movement you mentioned essentially circumduction of the hip to avoid hip flexion? So you're talking about when the athlete kind of goes left and right.
Yeah.
Is it essentially circumduction to avoid hip flexion?
Mike, you might actually have to help me here because I can't even.
I think to help answer that, I think it was a compensatory strategy. You see some of the fastest people in the world who have that rotation in the hip, and usually it is to either create space or to clear some space from something else that's either tight or weak. So it wasn't exactly circumduction. Circumduction is maybe a little bit different, but yeah, he was trying to clear some space. Essentially, is all it was. Not to avoid hip flexion specifically. I don't think that's entirely correct. But to compensate for something, definitely.
Yeah, I think I now I can visualize it a bit better. I think it almost is to like not avoid hip flexion, because obviously he does hip flex, but it's the timing is so whack that movement almost, it was like the initiator. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Rob. I actually don't know the answer.
Yeah.
I think it was a bit of both. I think he
Jack, I think you're on the money.
Yeah.
Like, so literally, like, it happens in squats, in fucking sprinting, in anything, because that's just swing leg is like flexion, abduction, and external rotation.
Yeah.
So if it can't flex enough, it'll abduct and externally rotate extra. Like, people do it in squats as well.
Yeah. It could even be from a, with these pre-existing hamstring issues as well. Trying to clear up a bit of space, the adductors can help hip extend. There's a few things, but Tony's asked, can we see the vision again?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Tony. I actually don't have a good video.
Void is the wrong term.
But really display the lateral flexion that well.
Yeah. Avoid is the wrong term, but perhaps working around reduced hip flexor strength. Yes. Yeah. I think everyone will agree with that. Rob, Tony, I'm not sure you're talking about lateral flexion tilt.
Okay, I'll show it like a representation of it.
I hope you're wearing pants. Are you wearing pants?
That's what was happening. I'm not sure what the jargon is to express it, but essentially,
yeah.
I think the way Rob has sort of questioned it is kind of the way I view it. He was almost, tilting to the side to bring the leg forward. Lateral flexion.
Sure. Yeah.
My apologies for the I don't know, the inability to express that with the right terms, but it's just sort of what we're seeing. I'm sure if Louis or Mike was doing these presentation, they'd be able to express it a lot better than me with better.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So lateral flexion and the tilting, glute med not stabilizing, what Tony's saying, essentially, they're occurring together, right? So you're either your hips are dropping on one side, so then you compensate to tilt to the other way. So much of a muchness, but I think it's pretty.
Jacko, I just want to say, if I just joined this and I saw that demo, I would say Sean Fitzsimmons.
Right. And you know what, Fudge? I went the entire presentation without saying a single athlete's name, but you've done a good job and just.
I'm sorry, but that's all I could think. Does he still run like that?
Well, you'll see soon.
We'll find out. Look, this is week one of the aforementioned program. 2 accelerations a week with dribbling as a development of his top speed mechanics. All right. So this is the dribble. This is what it looked like. And this is over 30 meters. I'll play it once more. Like, is it perfect? No. His foot is still pretty flaccid. It's pretty passive. It's not really doing a whole lot. It still flicks out a little bit. There's not much intention to bring it back, but I like the way his pelvis is. He's not rocking so much from side to side, and that was enough for Louis and I to say there's something here to try and pursue. We've got the resisted acceleration here. Like, again, you can see even as he ends the run, his first instinct is to just like let that thing drift forward. You know, because that's how the mind is functioning. But again, we're happy to really emphasize this. We felt like it was relatively safe. It's slow enough. Let's rock into it and keep on trying to find negative foot speed and bring it back under the hip, and with a dorsiflex foot. Let's move on to the next. And so this is 3 months later. So originally it was in the start of Feb. This is start of May, and lo and behold, the poor bloke has almost the exact same program here. So he's still accelerating twice a week. As far as the gym went, you know, his trap bar was starting to get heavier. We're happy with his standards of strength. So he kind of started to push a little bit more power later on in the week with more hang clean stuff. But as far as the running goes, he started to run faster. So we gave him a bit more time to recover in between repetitions and drop the volume. And the total volume of the session reduced. He was able to show more competency over the dribbles. So we extended him over to 50 meters. And even if we wrote this here, we didn't really know what was going to happen. So we had options, right? So we wanted to start to move him to more upright sprinting. So we did long sled sprints over 30 and 40 meters, you know, with adequate rest in between. And even doing that, he may get 5 meters of upright running mechanics. And we can have a look at what it looks like. So this is dribble 3 months later. I can play it again. Okay, and Louis and I were like, okay, every session you see it get a tiny bit better, but when you look at video to video, you can see the foot is just beautifully dorsiflex. It's coming under the hip. That free leg is parallel to the floor. And at some point we chucked a free lap chip on him and he did a 20-meter fly without knowing it and still ran like a 2.4 over 20 meters just with dribbling. And we're really happy with where things are going. So he was going as fast as typical maybe some like other speed endurance methodologies may have gone, or tempo runs. And it's done with postures which are more transferable to sprinting. This is what his acceleration looked like unresisted. And I might actually just get this one up on YouTube quickly. And look, I appreciate you guys all hanging around because this presentation is, it's going. There's not too much left. So him coming into more upright postures as he's going through acceleration. His foot is beautifully dorsiflexing. That point, he starts to find a bit of negative foot speed as he comes into the floor. His body is shifting over that thing faster than you can imagine, considering the speeds of the camera. And at the point of like ground contact, the knees are now closed, and that's a more parallel shin there. And at that point, we're starting to think that, you know, we're happy with this intervention. I've got 2 more videos to share. This is what the longest sled sprints look like. So here he's like, it's almost upright running mechanics, and it's only 5, 6, 7 meters exposure. I think this is his second time doing it on the right here. Awesome. So at that point, we started to say, okay, let's actually unleash him a little bit and put him in unresisted environment to try and hold this technical intervention under more stress. But anyway, sadly, we haven't been able to do that because of COVID. You know, we could have maybe run him down at training, but we're like, the world's in a weird place. Stress is high, things are going on. The last thing we want to do is just dump the hardest stimulus that you can give an athlete, maximal velocity for a guy who's probably going to hit over 11 meters a second in 30 meters. So we'll hold off on that. And I hope we can do this presentation in 6 to 12 months time and see what it comes into. But as we're going through this, we always just need to sort of be one step ahead of the curve. We need to understand what the acceleration, you know, what are the progressions, spikes, recovery, distance, volume. How can we enter speed in that? For us, we want it to be 40 meters. what is the competency of his skill? Like how can we measure it? So he sort of walked into our training environment having no idea what he's doing. Very quickly, we almost skipped this part. Number one, he figured out what he needed to develop. He worked very hard, conscious competence. And I think he runs now with sort of some unconscious competence as far as his feet and his hips go. And then before competing, what we really want to see is like that technical model put under serious stress by competing against someone within our own training squad. And then maybe we go and hit up another training squad and be like, hey, can your 2 fastest athletes come and do 60-meter races, 1 or 2, doesn't matter, against our guy. And hopefully there's no technical breakdown. At that stage, we're like, okay, let's rock and roll and let's compete. And you're going to drop an absolute bomb. Now, this is the last slide. Is it working? You know, firstly, you just need to continually reward effort to execute a good technical cue. You need to take and watch the footage, analyze it, and compare it to what the former technical model was. You need to track the times, but always encourage the effort to execute technical cues over just rewarding better times. Because people just start tracking, you know, they chase times and it's just intensifying a flawed model. You need to stabilize the skill prior to challenging it once again. Once you think you've got the skill nailed, just keep it there for even longer. And then look, if your intervention sucks, you know, you need to throw your ego and your bias out of the window. Admit it to yourself. This is not it. This intervention wasn't great. Just blow it up. Try something else. And maybe just admit it to the athlete as well. Like last year, we got this really fast guy and I wanted to teach him acceleration. He was pulling like heavy sleds. It was all this stuff. It was 8 weeks of this. And it didn't improve him. And I just had to say, sorry, I was off on this call. Like, let's put it to the side. Don't worry about it. Let's look at it through a different lens. And we're able to move on instead of just hammering him. So I really wanted to show this. Louis made this great video of a side-by-side comparison of the technical model with it was 4 months difference. You can find this on my awful YouTube page, which have videos which make no sense of the title. But it's just a good example of how you need to compare yourself to your former self. As far as the programming takeaways, just program to the needs of the athlete, identify what needs to be worked on, create the environment to work on it, just hammer that outcome repeatedly. Like if it's important, you'll do a ton of it. Stabilize the technique, and at that point you can then progress. That's all I've prepared for you all. I hope it made sense. I felt like I haven't talked this much in a very long time. Thanks. There's 31 people here, a lot of you who I don't know. And I just thank you for guys for hanging around and just listening to me talk a lot of shit. So thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Oh, my voice.
Just sharing. So I'll just stop the sharing.
Yes.
So you are now, we can see everyone on the line. Everyone got that joke on the line? I thought it was funny. Whatever. So we had that question earlier.
Yeah, from Tony.
It was something about front side to minimize ground contact and max velocity. What are your thoughts on foot ankle in acceleration phase? That's what it was. So foot and ankle acceleration phase.
I honestly think the principles apply pretty similarly, but they'll just present slightly differently. So,
yeah.
In the end, you want that foot to be coming back, where the bandwidths are just different. So if you're in an acceleration posture, perhaps there is a little bit of a gap between the knees at the point of ground contact because you're sort of getting a bit more extension length and you're trying to push harder. You're trying to overcome inertia when you're accelerating. I just want to make sure I answer this question.
And then he said, Tony, I've got a fair anterior pelvic tilt. I don't think it has an overly large influence on hip movement in sprinting.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, especially if you look at a lot of the female athletes, a lot of them are just like slanted forward. and they're just turning it over. I think, this is quite like a general presentation, and I think everyone is going to be presenting different bodies with different needs. But I think if you can create a technical model in which you're in sort of an anterior pelvic tilt, what is just going to be more challenging is that once that leg sort of comes through, that you're able to work it back under. The thing is that if you're if a lot of athletes don't really have that capability to find like a pre-tension in flight prior to ground contact when it's stuck in anterior, and what ends up happening is they just sort of slap the ground in front of them. And so I think you can run with an anterior pelvic tilt, that's fine. But I think especially if you're in control of it and it feels stable, but if everything is just flinging forward and your ground contacts are heavy and in front of you, you're going to suck. But I think a lot of the female athletes, especially like a lot of the Jamaicans, like a lot of the Americans, like the big booties and stuff like that, they're stuck there, but they're able to bring it back under and create negative foot speed and have that intent to move forward. I hope that answers.
Yep. So of course, there's no harm in stretching the hip flexors, keeping flexible, and extensors strong. So I think
don't argue with that at all.
I think the simple answer is you probably can run like that, and if you're not getting a whole bunch of issues with it, keep running that way. But if you are, then you probably have to change something, right? So
yeah.
Any other questions or?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Do you have I guess a time efficient way of analyzing all this video, and is there sort of a minimum time period in which you are analyzing? Are you analyzing session to session or week to week or block to block, that sort of thing? Or like, what's your process?
Well, this is where I'm blessed to have a team of people, right? So Mike doesn't sleep, and Louis is the biggest nerd I know of at this. So I mean, I think that's like it's an important part of like what I see going forward in athletics in Australia. Like, it's hard to do it as an individual. In reality, there's no quick way to do it. You just need to watch video and put it together. Like, but I'm not efficient at it. I'm terrible at it. Like, and Louis is very good at it. So he does that. My skill set like falls differently. I want to say there's an efficient way. Louis, do you have any way to efficiently get through video better?
Not really. I think you just have to be willing to watch it all.
Yeah.
And draw conclusions. That's it.
Yeah, I think we've probably been stuck in the car together for about 3 hours at the front of your place, just looking at videos, talking smack. I think fogging up and stuff. It gets a bit weird, but that's all right.
The point of especially the start of the presentation is that it can be disabling when looking at videos because there's so many things to look at. So especially the first half of this video, I kind of wanted to make it easier to watch. And, there are key rocks which you should focus on. Like, I've had instances where I'm looking at a video with an athlete and I'm trying to say, this is what we're looking at. It's like we're looking at the foot, but then the response with the athlete may be, oh, but how about like the freaking like rhomboid? You know what I mean? It could be something else. So what I would encourage is to just continue to try and focus on really what matters. And if you're focusing on what matters all the time, then it might just be more efficient.
Yeah, I think the other thing is sometimes it's good to take videos, but then it's also, I've fallen into the trap where you look at everything in slow motion and it looks completely different if you're just looking at it in real time. And I think, biomechanics and technology has come quite far. We're still trying to prove things that you can see with your eye that, Vicon still can't pick up sometimes. So, it's interesting. So if you're looking at it, you can see something that probably doesn't look right, then maybe video it. But you're analyzing something every 5 seconds. It's good to keep a record of it because then obviously you can go back and reflect on it.
Yeah.
At the time, you might not want to analyze it, but you might, 3 months down the track, have a look at something.
Yeah, I think analyzing it in the moment can just be difficult. You just don't know what you're looking for, and you won't be able to come up with an adequate solution in the moment. Like, try to do it out of training, I think.
Not sure that.
So you guys are analysing session to session then?
No, we'll look at stuff. Louis probably do it. Like if I video something, I might look at it, but we sort of, for tracking the progress of athletes, we're just sort of something's not. I don't know.
There's a lot of hours. There's a lot of hours that aren't accounted for. I think that was Vass. Is that you, Vass? That was you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hours that aren't accounted for, that you're essentially analyzing stuff that then you go, well, actually that wasn't worth the 6 hours I used, whatever program to analyze it. But
yeah.
Any other questions? We had, I think, Mick, you were gonna ask something.
Yeah, it was the same question.
Okay. Yeah, and you said Altus has a kilogram guide, which is great. I think that's a good starting point, but yeah, certainly does not make it any quicker.
I think actually Nathan Kiley's done some stuff on organising it as well, which I think is a little simpler than Altus, but it's still hard to get away from the time factor.
You still got to freeze frame it a bunch of things and look at it.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the video, if you're clear about what you want to get done, then you just keep looking at the same thing in video over and over and over again until it's done, and then you move on to the next thing. So like video analysis shouldn't really take that long if you know what you're looking for. And if you know your athlete well and what technical intervention you're trying to make with that athlete. If I video that athlete and that athlete hasn't flexed their foot in like 2 months, whatever, then I'm looking at the foot and it should only take me like 6 seconds. It's like, it wasn't really right. That's like, it is what it is, but
I think just looking at one thing at a time, you said that a few times, Jack, in this video, we're looking at this only. And it's like, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with a few of the different athletes that you presented. But at that point in time, you're looking at one thing for maybe 6 weeks, and it's like, well, I don't really care what's happening elsewhere. We just want to fix that one thing. Then we'll tick that box and move on to the next one. So
if you get a big change in 6 weeks, it's like holy grail, like awesome. I don't know what you've done to do it, but
I think that's probably a good segue into how do you keep buy-in from an athlete who's used to doing something maybe that's traditional, where they just get flogged every session and you're asking them to dribble for every session. Like, I think that's, what do you do there?
You're blessed with an athlete who just wants to listen. Like, that's the best type of athlete to work with. And
how did you get like adherence to these like programs?
Jack threatens with the dumbbell. He gets a dumbbell and they usually listen after that. But
look, it's hard to. Okay, you do consider personality and the person in front of you, but if their goal is lofty, then you give them what they need, and it's like you shouldn't actually. I don't know. We just knew with that person, like if we're gonna ask him to dribble, like over lockdown, he's dribbling like 3 days a week. And like, he'll do it. He wants to, he knows it's important. We've outlined to him why it's important. So adherence wasn't actually an issue. I don't know. Yeah. He's just a freak. I couldn't do it, to be honest. I want variation. I want sensation. I want this, that, and that's why I suck. That's why I suck. I'll go running down a hill tomorrow. But, yeah, adherence was not even a discussion had.
Well, Kev said good-looking coach. Buy-in is pretty easy. I think he's talking about...
he's definitely talking about Louis and Mike. Yeah.
Kind of on the same vein of adherence, like I think with programming those kind of regression sessions where it's sort of taken back from like traditional running and volume, like when do you sort of like, obviously what you showed when you're putting it in, but when do you feel like it's necessary to put in for maybe an athlete that's not necessarily so like, I guess, like fitness inclined, because obviously he's coming from like a 400 background, but like what if it's like, 100 guy that struggles to get through a 200 kind of thing. Like, so obviously volume is more important for them in that regard.
It's a good question. That's the beauty of 100 meters, right? Is that you actually, what are the metabolic demands of the 100? Like, you just got to be explosive and really like a good technical model will take you home as well. And so I think while you're trying to make these technical changes, which is what we've done for a lot of the 400 guys and girls, we just had to supplement a lot of their conditioning, like in a different way. So they were doing what we'd do on the track, like on a bike, and just go hell for leather, and they'll vomit and they'll be fit, and that's fine. And then, but if this athlete, which we showed a video of, is going to move up to 200s, he might run 200s this year, but it also just may take longer than a year. So he might only get up to like 70, 80 meters. And this year he might run a 200, he might not, but yeah, you can only accomplish so much in a given time. So he will run the longer stuff, but it just might not be this year. I don't know how he's going to progress. He's learning fast, so I feel confident that he might, but who knows?
So short answer is play the long game.
Yeah, what's the rush? You know, there's a rush for some, but because of event deadlines and stuff. But this is why it's been a pleasure coaching this guy in particular, because it's like we're all about just creating a technical model which can have sustained success for a long time.
Yeah, why the rush, Michael? It's pretty clear with this whole COVID year and the Olympics being pushed back a year. Everyone was forced to not rush, right? Everyone forced not to peak for a second that didn't happen. And, you know, the results around the world are ridiculous. There's everyone breaking world records, running the fastest they've ever run. And yeah, I mean, in Australia anyway, we've got probably one of the strongest teams we're sending, I think, to the Olympics. It's awesome. Like, because in Australia anyway, we were forced to not have a big season, so everyone could go back into that rebuild and you know, spend a bit more time fixing some of the things they wanted to before competing.
Yeah, and that's a great point. That reminded me of something the late Rick Mitchell posted in that Athletes Australia group. Yeah. He said something about like obviously he was at that Olympic level, so he was having a major every year, but he said pick 1 year in that Olympic cycle where you don't do the major and actually take some time to sort of work on those fundamentals, I suppose. So it's a great point.
Yeah, and it's case by case, but I think that if you can improve by 1%, it's like an achievement. You know, and then it just compounds over and over and over again if you're able to string together 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But how can you tell someone that, like, I don't know, the thing, you're going to go backwards. As long as you just keep moving forwards, you'll get there. But yeah, I don't know. Are there any more questions, or I might wrap
it up? What do you reckon, Jack?
Yeah.
Jack, I didn't have a question so much as a thank you from everyone, I assume, to both yourself, Michael, and Louis, who's in the background, who apparently has contributed a lot of the material for this presentation. Yeah. One of the sort of things that I noted, you did say from the start, this is a look at a simple version of running tech or running analysis. And as a self-confessed non-track athlete or great track coach by any means, one of the things I think you really highlighted was that idea of let's look at the big rocks and those key things. So we can look at the ELTIS model and we can look at all your various angles and so forth. But one of the key things I've certainly learned from this is, well, why don't we just look at one component to start with, and after a training block, even altering that one factor may cause a drastic change up the chain. So, you know, if we're looking at foot and we're looking at knee position and we're looking at swing and so forth, just by changing one of those might impact up the chain anyway. And so it's probably easier just I'm going to focus on one thing for 6 weeks, see if I can impact a change, then look at, you know, one more thing on that. And to be honest, like, I don't want to rant here, but the similarities, the similarities between, you know, and no one will probably get this, but between skills coaching, and in particular, all of this is just skill. It's just skill development. It's just motor learning, and jiu-jitsu is ridiculous. All right, because essentially you've got the skills versus the physical. Everyone wants to get fitter, stronger, more flexible, but we know there's weight divisions for a reason, because skills are the dominant feature, you know. And so we can spend all the time on the engine, but if we can just teach the driver, and as an educator yourself, I'm guessing the more time you can educate your athlete on why you want to work on something, why you think this is important. You know, Michael, you spoke about as well. Well, we sat down with this athlete and explained to them, well, we don't want you to do X, Y, and Z because you've got this background, this injury history, these are your movement mechanics. Like, it's the same thing. This whole idea, if we can connect with the athlete, the buy-in comes from them understanding the why, and then you've got a plan. Well, we think we've got solutions. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic presentation to bring what are really universal concepts back into, again, skills beat physical, you know, unless the physical is so ridiculously outweighing the skill component. Thanks to you all for bringing this together.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. And you know, the cool thing is that once you like nail this repetitively, like you actually get adaptations made from good expression and skill. Like I read that stupid thing on ankle stiffness. Repeated. Imagine if you spent 6 months of the year running 11 meters per second in a good position with ground contact times of like this much. What are the physical adaptations that you're going to make out of that? You know, like, so, you know, it is skill, but the skill leads to metabolic skills. It leads to the physical adaptations. It is all just learning. Like, I think I could replicate that presentation next week when I'm trying to teach T.S. Eliot poetry, because it all just has to be it has to be just deconstructed and simplified, and then you get the why, and then they can fuck around with it and have a good time. That's how
Principles of learning are the same regardless of whether it's sprinting, jiu-jitsu, weightlifting, kicking a footy, etc.
Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for that.
I think we're lucky as well, because everyone who's in the squad either did exercise science, is a physio, is an EP. Seems like everyone has a background in the body and human movement. It's a biased population, I think. We've got...
Anyways, if there's anything else, like hit me up. I think I'm going to leave it there because I could talk for hours. And but thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it, and I'll make sure to get this up on YouTube if you want to rewatch it.
Thanks, guys.
See you, everyone.
See you, everyone.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks, guys.